Real GDP, or real gross domestic product, is what we call a flow variable that measures the value of all final goods and services produced in an economy within a period of time, usually a year, but quarterly measures do exist. A flow variable is measured in values that are always relative to time. Revenue and expenditures for a company or a government is always expressed as per year or in the last quarter. That's because how much money a firm made or how much a country exports is meaningless for making comparisons without a constant like time. Stock variables, on the other hand, are expressed as snapshots of time. A company had a certain amount of money on hand on a certain date, for example, or a government owed a certain amount of debt at a certain point in time. Time still exists with stock variables, but it's assumed that the variable you're looking at is more like a photograph of a moment. On the other hand, flow variables are like videos, expressing information gathered while time moved. Real GDP and its components are flow variables that describe the activity of major buyers or sectors in the economy. Those components are personal consumption, which come from households, private investment, which comes from business, government expenditures, which represent the public sector, and in an open economy, net exports, which is the value of all of what we sell outside the economy after subtracting out or netting out the value of what we consumed from outside the economy. Closed economies are mostly theoretical and modeled by excluding net exports from real GDP. Personal consumption accounts for about 70% of real GDP in the United States. Its interaction with the rest of the economy can be depicted by the basic circular flow model, within which households purchase goods and services from firms that in turn purchase labor from households. That takes us to the private business sector, which contributes to the gross private investment component of real GDP. It's usually 15% of the pie, but volatility is especially pronounced in this component from year to year. A few things to keep in mind. First, investment in this case is economic investment, which creates new capital in the economy. Investment does not include financial investment like purchasing stocks or bonds. And that brings us to my second point. Private investment is how the economy adds to its stock of capital, which is one way to grow the economy. Therefore, it represents a decision from the economy to forego current consumption and instead spend on building capacity to consume more in the future. Using the circular flow model, private investment would look something like firms flowing money back into themselves as they spend on growing their stock of capital. Government expenditures include purchases of goods and services from firms by the government, as well as any final goods or services produced by the government. This, of course, excludes what we call transfer payments, money distributed to the non-public sector without any exchange of goods or services. Social Security, cash assistance, college tuition grants, unemployment insurance, corporate grants, and SNAP or food stamps would all be examples of transfer payments. In a circular flow model, the government would be participating in markets with firms, exchanging money for goods and services from the firms, and technically in markets with households, exchanging money for labor. After all, you usually need people besides politicians to run the day-to-day operations of a large government, so it makes sense they would hire. At this point, we have a closed economy, which includes a private and public sector. The private sector includes households that consume goods and services and sell labor to firms that also invest in capital. The public sector includes a government that purchases goods and services from firms and labor from households. An open economy, on the other hand, the type we'll almost always be discussing, includes a net exports component. This is the difference between the final value of goods and services one economy sells to others minus the final value of goods and services that the economy consumes from abroad. If the value is positive, it's a sign the economy is in a trade surplus, with exports adding to the output of the economy. On the other hand, a negative value indicates a trade deficit, meaning the economy consumes more from abroad than it sells abroad. All of these components will be discussed in far more depth later. But right now, you should appreciate that all four components of the economy interact with each other, such that changes in one component can cause changes in the others in honestly fascinating ways. But that is what makes GDP an interesting concept. In trying to measure a living, breathing organ like a macroeconomy, we have to find a way to translate the activities and transactions into something measurable, acknowledging that even as we measure its composition, it's perpetually in metamorphosis.